from Labor Union TV. How are ya? We're here to give you 16 reasons why labor union families will vote for Senator Bernie Sanders in 2020. So we're celebrating that. 16 reasons. Okay, this is the second one of the 8 reasons. Okay. Bernie, a lot of people confuse Bernie with other people, but they say that Bernie must be under control of the Democratic Party. Mostly these are young people who think the Democratic Party is monolith. But anyway, he is not under control of the Democratic Party. Notice how they floated 4 candidates to take his place. Kamala Harris, the former California Attorney General, who overlooked Steve Mnuchin's huge eviction and foreclosure on at least 15,000. Well, he foreclosed on millions, but 15,000 were done when people were making their payments. He's a criminal, and he should have been put in jail. Instead of that, he gave her a big donation. And so she overlooked his criminality. Cory Booker, famous for trashing public education in favor of charter schools. He's the charter schools fool, running around getting money from all the 1% for his charter schools. Now, the only good one there is Kirsten Gillibrand from New York State, senator from New York State. She is a real progressive, I think, although I don't know her that well. And then the last one they put out is the old reliable Joe Biden, always waiting for another chance to be president. But he's a nice guy, so. But anyway, those 4 people were put out by the DNC against Bernie, so you can see that they don't control Bernie. But Bernie has something better than those 4 candidates. He has 50 million labor union families that will vote for him. There are 16 million members of the unions, card-carrying labor union members, 16 million. 16 million significant others, husbands, wives, whatever. 18 million best friends, mother and father, cousins, next door neighbor, poker game buddies, sewing circle sisters. You get the idea. 18 million on top of the 16 and 16. 16 and 16 is 32, and 18 makes 50. 50 million union families will be voting for Bernie Sanders in 2020. And also, I think that they'll be voting for the progressive congressional candidates put together by the Justice Democrats, Our Revolution, that's Bernie Sanders' group, and also Brand New Congress. There's 3 groups that I know of that are going to be running independent candidates against the Blue Dog Democrats, which the DNC does control. Okay, number 10, civil rights. Bernie has been a fighter for the civil rights in this country since I can remember. Many people claim that they are sympathetic with Martin Luther King's ideals and stuff. We have photographs of Bernie in suit and tie with jet black hair, being arrested at the University of Chicago in the early 60s for fighting housing discrimination against African Americans. Bernie has fought discrimination his entire life. That's why he has an 85% rating with African American voters.
Just today in the Chicago Tribune, if we can put this up on the screen, surfaces this photo of a young Bernie Sanders, wearing, I think, painter's pants and his Stan Smiths and horn-rimmed glasses. Looks a bit like Al Franken, being arrested in 1963 on the south side of Chicago in the midst of the civil rights movement. I think that's a picture that's going to speak 1,000 words.
It's a nice one, and he's able to point to a couple of other things a half a century ago.
Bernie has been a fighter against the NSA's wiretapping of 350 million Americans. Where do they get off? The Constitution says that the government has no right to search American citizens without a warrant. And for 200 years, we have required the government agencies to exercise a warrant, to get a warrant from a judge who's independent before they can search our papers or take pictures of us like they're doing or wiretap us. But now we've got a brand new America where the NSA has the right to listen in to all our phone calls, to photograph all our emails and texts. In other words, to totally record our lives for their satisfaction. This is the KGB of Russia. We now have the KGB in the FBI. Okay, but Bernie's going to fight that along with the rest of us, so stay tuned for that. Equal rights. The Constitution says we're all created equal, and yet women have been discriminated against since the beginning. Women earn 79 cents for every dollar that a man earns, and that's discrimination and a violation of the Constitution. The Equal Rights Amendment is an attempt to remedy this, and Bernie has been a supporter of the ERA for at least 20 years, if not 30. Not only that, but Bernie has brought up something very sensitive. He says that there is a remarkable amount of sexual harassment of women going on. And he said it's gotten to the stage where it's actually obscene. In my view, it's more than obscene, it's illegal. Bernie says we need a revolution to change the way men treat women. Amen.
Issue of enormous consequence for this country. And what I worry about, Jake, is not just what happens with regard to famous people. We see that in the papers every day, whether it's in the media, the corporate world, or in politics. Right now, as we speak, in restaurants all over this country, in offices all over this country, there are folks who are not famous, who are harassing women, making demands on women that are obscene. And we need a revolution in the way we treat women at the workforce.
Climate justice. Bernie's been a fighter for environmental causes for 30 or 40 years also. Bernie was right there with the Native Americans at Standing Rock. Number 13, hire 12 million unemployed American citizens. There are, the unemployment statistics hide the fact that there are 20 or 30 million Americans who would take a job in a second if it was offered. FDR in the 30s hired 10 million people to build the Hoover Dam, to build a lot of the dams and major construction and libraries and post offices in the country. Bernie says let's hire 12 million. Number 14, when asked by a pundit reporter how he was going to pay for hiring 12 million people, Bernie suggested let's cut the Pentagon budget. The Pentagon budget, which they just swelled by another 80 billion. Okay. What are we doing with this military? 7 wars, all losers. Shipping hundreds of billions of dollars worth of armaments to Saudi Arabia so they can massacre the defenseless Yemenis. They don't have an army, the Yemenis. They're just attacking villagers with a different religion. It's a disgustingly obscene, ahistorical battle the United States is funding or helping to finance because it spends weapons that the military-industrial complex wants to use up so they can build some new ones. But it's killing and causing cholera in Yemen. We need to cut. There are 950 American military bases around the world. There are about 300, 400 of them encircling China and Russia. These bases, 950 bases, cost us $100 billion a year. so we can save $100 billion by cutting those 950 bases. Also, we need to take the missiles off launch on warning. There's no reason in the world we should have been on hair trigger alert with Russia. It's not the Soviet Union. They're dying to be capitalists. And yet the United States keeps a launch on warning with its missiles. This is crazy. This is insane. Okay, number 15, DACA, the Dreamers. Bernie has supported a humane immigration reform since 1960 or 70. Bernie, he's also against the insane wall, and for the most part, he sees all these private prisons that have been built that were empty before they started rounding up Chicano Americans. Now they filled them up with these people who are not criminals. They've crossed the border, but that's not against the law. That's not a misdemeanor. It's not a felony. It's a State Department violation. And these people are being held in prison just like they were criminals. And it's a disgusting situation. Bernie wants to close those private prisons, for-profit prisons. Number 16, and our last one, free college for all, especially our returning service people. Free college. Free computer training. And forgive the 1.5 trillion student loans that are hanging like an albatross around the necks of our kids. Liberate them from those 1.5 trillion loans and free them to make a contribution to the American society.
Roseanne, thank you so much. And we thank all of the nurses, not only for the life-saving work they perform every single day, but for getting active in the political process as well. We have a crisis in higher education today. Too many of our young people cannot afford a college education, and many of those who are leaving school are faced with crushing debt. It is a national disgrace that hundreds of thousands of young Americans do not go to college, not because they are unqualified, but simply because they cannot afford it.
83 million millennials plus 50 million labor union families. That's 133 million people voting for Bernie in 2020. Remember, the current president won with only 62 million votes. 62 million. Bernie has 50 million labor union families and 83 millennials who want free college and want to get rid of that loan that's hanging around their neck. That's 133 million. That's why we're saying this is going to be a landslide for Bernie and the Democratic Party if they're smart enough to get in line behind him. But if they keep insulting him, he's going to go independent. And if he goes independent with his 133 million voters, goodbye Democratic Party. This is Bill Floyd from Labor Union TV.